I got it. Okay. 1 minute. You need also a mic, no? עד שהוא ילביש לי את זה, אני אתן לך... אנטון, אתה תכתוב לו שאני, תתחילי לדבר, ואז ככה נסתדר, כי היא לא שומעת אותנו. הוא תהיה הראשונה, ואחרי ששלמה זה, ככה נתחיל. יאללה, התחלנו.
This session is called the Metamorphosis of the Kibbutz. It's based on a book published last year by Michal and Orna Shemer, that is here were the editors. And we'll hear 3 presentations based on the book. First one will be the presentation of Sylvie, Fogiel-Bijaoui, and Michal Palgi. With a long name, so they will read the name. Sylvie Fogiel-Bijaoui is an associate professor of sociology at the Israel Academic College in Ramat Gan, Israel. She holds a PhD in political sociology from the École des Hautes Études en Sciences Sociales from Paris, West Nantes. Her field of research are gender studies, citizenship and human rights, family and kibbutz studies. She has published extensively on these topics in peer-reviewed journals, chapters, and books. Michal Palgi, an organizational sociologist, is a senior researcher and former head of the Kibbutz Research Institute at the University of Haifa. She was the president of the ICSA, as well as the president of the Sociological Association Research Committee on Participation, Organizational Democracy, and Self-Management. The stage is to Sylvia that will present her paper.
תכתוב לה. אוקיי. תכתוב לה שתתחיל. אז שתעלה את המסך, כי היא לא כל כך מבינה.
סילביה, פליז.
כתבתי לה, אני מקווה שהיא רואה. כן.
We have some technical problems. We'll solve them in a minute, hopefully.
I am very sorry, but I don't hear you. And I wish to present my research, which was made with Professor Michal Palgi. I hope you hear me. So I will present the situation of women in Israel, in the kibbutz in the 21st century. For this paper, I hope you hear me. I have the idea of presenting 3 points. First of all, I want to contextualize.
Don't see it on the screen.
Utopia.
I see.
And remember to all of us that
you have a presentation.
Utopias are doomed to fall and to fail. And when we speak about women, we have to remember that to use the tools, analytical tools, Nancy Fraser gave us, which means recognition, redistribution, and representation. So each time we look at communes with these 3 parameters, we see that there is inequality, more or less. So we don't find any equality in any commune, and it is important, and in any place anyway, so it is important to present it also. The second point of my intervention will be to refer to the 3 parameters, recognition, redistribution, and representation, and to make to apply these parameters to the kibbutz situation regarding women. As I told you, the research was made by Michal Palgi, Professor Michal Palgi, and by myself. And the last point I would like to share with you is what we can say about women, especially feminists today in Israel, and not only in Israel. I think that all over the world where there are democratic islands, can I say, communes, many communes, and feminists in the communes are part of the democratic agenda. And this is what I will present as a conclusion. So my first point, as I said before, I hope you see, what we can say about communes is that they are doomed to fail. And regarding an historical, with an historical perspective, we can say that it does not matter whether these are socialist or religious communes. This is all the history of communes, modern communes, and religious commune in modern times also point to the same things. We have also to remember that most of the communes were short-lived communes with few members and inhabitants. When we speak about the kibbutz, so we have different phases of inequality and different aspects of inequality according to more than 100 years of living, if I can say so, according to the number of people who are living also in these communes, and according to the fact that communes have become more and more, kibbutzim have become more and more privatized. So we have more and more challenge and more and more new approach to communes and to the gender equality parameter. So regarding the communes and the kibbutz afterwards, and referring to Nancy Fraser, I would like, as we did in our paper, which was published in 2021 in English, we first refer to recognition, according to Nancy Fraser, and recognition is the recognition of the other, of his identity and right. Recognition is very central to the process that generates institutional change in all the fields and the domains. And of course, recognition, when we speak of women, is a kind of changing the androcentric discourse and an approach which put more value on femininity and womanhood. Recognition is essential to become an equal member of society. Redistribution, the second parameter which we use to analyze utopia and kibbutz among them. The second parameter is redistribution. It is the way resources are redistributed according to gender, following a change in the economic order. The third point, of course, is representation, which is essential for a democratic system. And we can speak in any democratic society of two kinds of representation, of descriptive representation and of substantive representation. Descriptive representation is a sociological representation. It says to us whether women are not in center of powers. Substantive representation is another level. It says to us whether women and other people can, but especially women can promote women's human rights. And it is also called political representation. We see, and as we shall see, regarding the kibbutz, we are more women and more feminist, and it is an important change, slight change in the kibbutz structure. So regarding what I called RRR, recognition, representation, and before that redistribution, we can see that there were never equality, as I said. Even in modern communes in the 60s and 70s and afterwards, we saw the reproduction of patriarchy. But what we can say that there is a continuum on which we can situate women's status and rights and obligations. I'm sorry. Nugi. The last stratified communes, as we know from an historical perspective, are the communes where the men enter what is called the feminine sphere, and not where the women only enter the masculine sphere. So I now turn to the gender recognition in the kibbutz and to trying to understand if there is at the third decade of the 21st century something which has changed. As we all know, what was the standard in the kibbutz history and in other communes also was masculinity, whatever this meant. What we see in the last decades is a change, meaning that femininity or so-called femininity, and especially women's sphere, is more evaluated, especially when we look at the family. Women are at the center of the family, but men entered a little bit this domain and this sphere and play a more active role regarding what they do in the family. Moreover, we see that the patriarchal family, as it used to be, actually reproduced in the kibbutz in many aspects, is changing. One of these aspects of the change is the fact that we see now same-sex families and who live openly in the kibbutz. So that we see a change in the patriarchal family as it was adapted in the kibbutz history, and we see a decline of the patriarchal family, but not that great decline, because of course masculinity is still the norm. And if I refer to Rewin Cowell and to a patriarchal dividend, it is still at play, and we still see that men's privilege still exists in the kibbutz context. No, I'm sorry. Regarding redistribution, we see inequality. Inequality which is growing. It was in existence, and actually it was part of the history of the kibbutz, but in different forms. Today we have wages, as we said, because kibbutz have been, most of the kibbutz have been privatized. So there are different wages between men and women. And it is very clear when we look at the wages. For instance, according to Palgi and Orna, we see in 2000, in the middle of the second decade, because I don't remember when it was made exactly, this research, but it was published in 2080, we see that most women are located from the low to the middle level of wages, while most men are located from the middle to the upper level of wages. So we see this kind of inequality, which is a very significant when we look at men and women, and it is an important, a huge problem for retired women, for all people in general, and for single mothers. And of course, there is a need of security net, but it is not enough. There is a security net for all the kibbutzim, but it's not enough. Regarding the representation, we see that women are more represented in centers of power than before, but as you see, the centers of power are more linked to the community and to roles in the community, while men are still at the center of powers of business and economics. This is what I said, what I spoke about when I spoke of Herwin-Connell patriarchal dividend. So women have a say in the community. They can influence the community, but by ways that are very different from men. This is, however, important, and I would like to refer to the different aspects which can explain this change. One of them is that women are more educated, at least formally, than in the past. More women now are feminists than in the past and speak overtly about their feminism. Moreover, there is a gender section in the gender equality section, which was created in 1988. No, in 1980, I'm sorry, but was dismantled, reorganized in 2000. And one of these main points of activity, of course, is promoting gender equality. Whatever it means men and women and also LGBT. So what we can see today is that women political participation is more encouraged than in the past. And it may be that this relatively successful focus on politics may have some impacts on kibbutz women in general. First of all, it may revive their involvement in institutional politics, which have been declining for decades. There is another factor which can be taken into account is the fact that the local is in the rise in every part of the Western world, of post-industrial world, and the influence of local authorities in Israel is growing. And another factor which explains this importance of the political role of the woman is, of course, the corona, the COVID-19, which has transformed some parts of the politics and some rules of the game, and put the local arena at the center. In other words, if I can point to a kind of change, is a crack in the glass ceiling of the kibbutz. I would like now to come to a conclusion. And my conclusion is at several levels. First, today in Israel, kibbutz women and especially kibbutz feminist women are part of the democratic agenda regarding populism, which is very virulent in our country, Arab citizens, LGBT, fundamentalists, allocation of land, which is a big issue in Israel, or at least they are active in this, on this dividing issues to promote a more democratic future. Another kind of conclusion I would like to refer to is that to understand or to promote gender equality, we have to rethink of a more equal approach to parenthood and to structure the apparatus of production according to equal parenthood. And a more egalitarian approach to manhood, womanhood, and parenthood. It means to integrate at the level of the institution the approach, of course, of Nancy Fraser. Finally, we can say that the communal experience teaches us for those who strive to implement gender equality, these are the most radical change. In the context of what could be an ongoing change of the kibbutz order, gender order, boosted by the COVID pandemic, even in the religious kibbutzim. It is also a crucial lesson for those communities that still choose to be a democratic alternative beyond populist and social Darwinist. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sylvie. Last of time. Our second remote presenter is Professor Yuval Dror. Yuval Dror is Professor Emeritus in the School of Education in Tel Aviv University and was the head of the school. He was the head of Orna, School of Education of the Kibbutz movement. His areas of specialization are history of education and social moral education in Eretz Israel under the British mandate and afterwards all types of new progressive education, including kibbutz education, and development of special methodology in the history of education. His numerous publications include many articles and chapters in journals and books, 20 edited books.
1 minute. They said that they don't hear you well. Maybe it's close.
Oh no, it's low.
Huh?
Actually, it's low.
Lower. Take my and continue.
I'll say it shortly now. Yuval Dror is Professor Emeritus in the School of Education, Tel Aviv University, and was the head of the school. He was the head of Oranim, the School of Education of the Kibbutz movement, and his area of specialization are history of education and social moral education in Eretz Israel under the British mandate, all types of new progressive education, including kibbutz education and development of special methodology in the history of education. He has many publications. I'll not cite them all. I'll give the stage to Yuval Dror to present his paper.
Thanks. Alon, please turn to the next slide.
Okay.
Okay. What I want to shed light on is what I call the Kibbutz Judaism. Nowadays and many years before. Now I've divided it into 3 levels. The local one, mainly the kibbutz itself, every kibbutz itself, the regional, and the national.
1 minute, Yuval. 1 minute.
Okay.
Can you make it here a little bit louder? You don't. Okay. You can continue. Sorry. Yuval, okay.
Okay. Now, I will shed light on the main topics and not read my paper. First of all, we have Kibbutz Judaism from the very beginning, from the Ganya onwards. But the term Kibbutz Judaism and the hesitations and debates about it started only in the beginning of the 21st century. So it's a very interesting point. And anyway, there are traditions from the past, things that are now in the arena of Kibbutz Judaism are influenced from what we had in the past. Next, please.
1 minute. Anton, what's happened? We don't hear him. We don't. Yuval, try again, please. No.
I don't know.
Okay. Okay, now it's okay.
Okay. So I just repeat in a few words. The Kibbutz Judaism was from the very beginning, from the Ganya onwards, but it was declared as a term. It was discussed and debated only in the first decades of the 21st century. So
Okay.
לי אין פה שום רשים.
You can continue.
זה אצל סילבי, זה אצל סילבי.
I mute Sylvie, it's okay. You can continue now, sorry.
Okay. What I mentioned is the traditions are from the past, even today. Please turn to the next slide.
Okay.
Alon?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Now, a very interesting point is that in the non-religious kibbutz, in the secular kibbutz, it was mediated by variables, education, culture, community. Namely, if we are looking in the kibbutz nowadays with the new residents, both those who came from outside the kibbutz and kibbutz-born members, they are in the secular kibbutzim, they are looking on the Kibbutz Judaism via education, celebrating the holidays, the same with culture, the same with community. We don't have it as something in the center, the Judaism of the kibbutz. And it's very interesting because in the previous decades, there were some experiments in order to make a very unique kibbutz Judaism. Next, please. Now, the same in the religious kibbutz, but Orthodox. So we have the same phenomena. The new residents are wanting the Judaism according to their belief, but it's via the education, culture, community, not by itself. It's not something that is unique to the religious kibbutz, but it's something that they have it in a daily life phenomena. Next, please. Okay. Now, what we have to mention is the few. Now we return, sorry, to the regional circle. In this circle, we have very few activities and very few kibbutz members that take it, that are taking these activities. It's going via the regional colleges or centers with other people from the region, from village, city, and so on. So it's not only the kibbutz, it's something of the regional, all the settlements area, and not only of the kibbutz. Next, please, Alon.
Okay.
רגע, לא, דילגת, לא? No, okay. Now, it's the same in the religious kibbutz movement, and the point, the very interesting point here is the Jewish renewal. Namely, even the religious kibbutz try to find his uniqueness, for example, in those areas that Sylvia talked before, involving the women in the religious activities. And it's a renewal thing. And by the way, the religious kibbutz movement is very active, not only in his, they have almost 30 kibbutzim, but also in Israel as a whole. Please turn to the next slide. Okay, now in the national circle, this is another story. There are things that I want to mention about the generation, about the institutions, and about the movements. Here we have another thing. Please go to the next. Okay. Now, in the secular centers, there are very interesting points. For example, the main secular centers are those that are located in some different venues, different arenas. For example, Hamidrasha in Oranim. Oranim is the teacher's college, and historically it was before in Oranim, but this is the venue. Bina is in Efal, the center of the kibbutz movement, the ideological and research center, and that's another venue. And the very, very interesting and different arena are the associations of the urban kibbutzim and the new communal groups that act with all the population in their cities. They are in Bet Shemesh, in Dror, and two kibbutzim in Jerusalem, and one in Nazareth, and in Nof HaGalil, sorry, in Nof HaGalil and Migdal HaEmek. So we have it now in the last decades in different places, also including the kibbutz festival institutions that are, the old one is this of Ramat Yochanan, the second one is in Bet Hashita, and these are another unique venue. Please. Okay. Now, the point the problematic point, let's say. And we have the creators that are few versus the consumers that are the majority. Because now, in the kibbutzim from the two sorts, those, the collective ones and those that are renewed, only few members are creatively involved and teach renewing Judaism, and the majority are only consumers. And that's a point that say that it's not as it was before. It's not belonging to the whole community, to the whole community. Please go to the, okay. Now, there is an expert. Give me the title, please. I don't see.
Kibbutz Judaism?
No, the expert. Okay, I have it printed. There is an expert. No, sorry, yes. The impact of the Kibbutz Judaism since the 70s, and also not only in the secular kibbutz, but also in the religious kibbutzim, is directed outward. And let's say it in another way, through the frameworks that were founded by few kibbutz members in the present or past. Also, a weak point of the kibbutz Judaism, the impact is not in the kibbutz itself. It means, for example, that the participants in those centers, both those of the secular kibbutzim and those of the religious kibbutzim, there are very few kibbutz members or kibbutz-born members that take place in these activities. The majority are coming from the outside, from the surrounding community, even from very, very far places. Please go ahead. Alon?
I go ahead.
Okay, the export. Now, what is the export that's turning outside? Now, there's an export of context, of methods and devices. And it's in the three Jewish circles, because things that are, for example, Hamidrasha, afterwards, there are a lot of centers like it in the Israeli cities, and the same about Bina Center. And they export the context of Kibbutz Judaism or the innovative Judaism, the methods of talking, Batei Midrash, Tikkun Olam, and so on, and also the devices, the means of learning of Jewish materials. And please, that's it. So many thanks, and I can conclude that there are a lot of changes, but there are also a lot of challenges for Kibbutz Judaism. It's not as it was before, but it can impact not only on the surrounding, but also on the kibbutz itself. Thanks.
Thank you, Yuval. Our last presenter sits next to me is Alon. Alon is a senior lecturer at Seminar Kibbutzim College, director of research at Yad Benkin, and chairman of the Kibbutz and Labor Movement Researchers Forum. His research deals with the shaping of Israel identity in general and the shaping of Kibbutz identity in particular, from the inception of the Zionist enterprise to this day. Alon, your turn.
Thank you. First, I want to thank to Professor Fogiel-Bijaoui and Professor Yuval Dror that you are far away, but we can hear you, and thank you very much. Also, my article, my paper, is from the book that you see here in the picture, The Metamorphosis of the Kibbutz. And I try to investigate these changes of the kibbutz through the changing of organizing language along the time continuum. So let's start. First, I want to explain what I mean by the terms organizing language. You can call these terms in many ways. Karl Marx call it a superstructure, Foucault call it discourse, others call it paradigm, others call it interpretive system of concept. All of these words, and I prefer the organizing language, deal with a combination of norms, value, power relation among social actors that imbued reality with linguistic interpretive meanings. Organized language is a set of linguistic elements that give shape to form of discourse, events, kinds of value, and orientation. First, I want to show you the 4 languages, and then I explain each one of them. I think you all know that from the beginning of the kibbutz, in 1910, the first kibbutz, the first kvutza, was at Gania. Until the mid-1960s, the ideological language was the main language that shaped the way of life on the kibbutz. In the mid-60s, the psychological language gradually replaced it, and later I will explain why. Because of the huge crisis, the economic crisis of the kibbutzim after 1985, the managerial language became the dominant language in the kibbutz discourse and shaped the agenda of the kibbutz. And since the 2000s, the legal language is the dominant language that shaped the agenda of the kibbutz. Okay, I decided, because of 2 reasons, not to explain the characteristic of the ideology language. I think most of you are familiar with the fact that the ideology language was the main language that shaped the discourse in the kibbutz until the mid-60s, 1960s. I want to demonstrate the stage as this language is decline and another language replace it. And I want to express it by quote 2 members of the kibbutz from the 2nd generation. You can see it also in Hebrew and also in English, that express this feeling. Here you can see the end of the ideology, the book, the famous book of Daniel Bell, but I transform it, what the people, the young people of the kibbutz, the 2nd generation said. Avshalom Ginat, a member of Kibbutz and Shemer, said in 1968, the ideology was the glue. Now it's evaporated. The next stage is the alienation. And another 2nd generation member of the kibbutz, Kibbutz Afikim, his name is Yechiel Chazak, wrote an article, Shutter Tablets in the kibbutz backyard. And he said, I don't quote everything, but some of his words, the ideology no longer supports his awareness. From the moment the ideology no longer support mental powers, what remain is a spiritual vacuum within those living in the kibbutz, and like any vacuum, it is demands a price. Two young people of the kibbutz express the feeling that this glue, the ideology language, is fade out, and we need to seek for another language. And this why slowly or gradually, the psychological language became the dominant. The feeling of an empty space and seepage of the end of ideologies in the kibbutz led to a trend viewing ideology as the source of all problem. It is in this context that towards the 1960s, there was a gradual process of attempt to convert the ideological language into psychological one. It was a kind of an integration, the source of this language, between Martin Buber's dialogue philosophy and the humanistic psychology of Maslow and Rogers. And these sources start to be more and more dominant. And if someone of you know, after the 6-Day War it's called the dialogue culture, Tarbut HaSichim, and a lot of home discussion group, intensive engagement with group dynamics techniques gradually gained a presence in the kibbutz life. To demonstrate it, to illustrate it, I will show you now some headline titles from the kibbutzim newspaper. And if we try to, 1 minute, I want to show you something with the marker. You can see a change of the word, effective in personal communication, group dynamics, communication and conversation. All of them, you can see it from the Israeli kibbutzim newspaper, dealing that we need to change or to seek for another glue, not the ideological glue because it evaporated, and maybe by make stronger the relationship between the kibbutz member and understand them well through the dialogue conversation and through group dynamics and so on. This will be the glue that combine the kibbutz community together. And when I analyze the newspapers of the kibbutzim, the kibbutzim press, it's amazing to see how a different language penetrate to the kibbutz yard. And if I sum it up very shortly, you can see the ideological language is rigid, the psychology is soft. The first one is demanding, the second one is accepting. The ideology is dogmatic, the psychology is debating, judgmental or forgiving, looks down from above, communication at eye to eye level. And you can see it on the articles and the behavior of the people that led the kibbutz in the time of the psychological language rule and try to dominate the relationship between the kibbutz member. Now in 1985, it starts before, but it starts to understand the huge economic crisis in the kibbutzim. And now we start to move to another language, the managerial language. I can divide the penetration of the managerial language to two stages or steps. The first one was the organizational consolation language. And after that, the director language. The organizational language, or the organization consolation era, at the time there was hardly kibbutz which wasn't being helped by an organizational consolation agency to deal with the impact of the crisis, economic crisis, and to develop appropriate methods of response. one way to examine the increasing presence of managerial language is by analyzing the advertisement in the early 1990s. The kibbutz press was flooded with ads placed by consultation firm, which offered seminar on new management models for the kibbutz. I give you some example from the weekly newspaper. For the first one, you can see in Hebrew, Vector, Yeutz V'Adracha, and I translate it. Vector, the organization and constellation company, invites you to a study day, a seminar, the new kibbutz, a realistic option. And another one, the Israeli Center of Management, the organizational consultant company, offers management by objective workshop. If someone remembers this period, if you didn't say something like MBO, TQM, another kinds of model, you wasn't in. You must use this word of the organization constellation that each firm suggests another model, but you must, if you say TQM, MBO, everything will be okay. Yes, yeah, exactly. Yes, here is another example from another firm that belonged to the Kibbutzim movement, the Takam, it was before. The Institute for Organization and Social Consolation is holding a study days on the subject of the organization, and so on and so on. When you read the newspaper in that day, most of the advertising was suggest you a consulant that changed the kibbutz because of the economic crisis. Consultant's language was probably appropriate for the confronting the kibbutz crisis. But after most kibbutzim adopted one or another model, the following stage was channel the energy to managerial language, not to promote and instill change anymore, but to preserve and maintain an existing reality. At that stage, managerial terminology was still placed, but was gradually being replaced by concept and a vocabulary suiting manager, chairperson, and directors. Here is another example. You can see on the Israeli Kibbutzim newspaper, the press, all the headlines was, suggest the Israel Center of Management offer a course for director and senior executive in the kibbutz economic. And another example, the senior manager club of kibbutz industry and economy has invite Knesset member. Okay, you can see, if you know the language of the kibbutz, I will explain it later. It's a foreign language. Senior manager club. You have club, you have a club for manager, and not that club for manager, a club for senior manager in the kibbutz. It's a kind of prestige. I belong to the senior managers club of the kibbutz. And in the kibbutzim, usually, the man who was the leader of the kibbutz, the kind of the manager of the kibbutz was called secretary. It belonged to the Soviet language, mazkir. Now, we are not looking for mazkir. We are looking for a chairperson. Here is an example for Kibbutz En Carmel, Kibbutz near Haifa, that ask Kibbutz En Carmel seek for a chairperson for the kibbutz. What we can see is a foreign language within the 1960s was still considered as a Trojan horse, a capitalist intruder to the palace of the socialism, was now penetrate forcefully into the kibbutz movement newspaper. And I demonstrated, you can see, if before in the kibbutz, the man was arranged who will work, you will work with the cow, it's called work coordinator. In Hebrew, it's called Sadran Avodah, and now became the human resource manager. The sector coordinator what is called in Hebrew, merakzei anafim, now became sector manager. The kibbutz secretary, mazkir kibbutz in Hebrew, was transformed into manager or chairperson of the community. The kibbutz secretary, mazkirut kibbutz, was now social management. The economic committee, Va'adat Meshek, is now economic management. So you can see all the word of manager, managers, chairperson, and so on, replace the language. I'm glad that Dr. Menachem Topel is sitting with us today, and it's our pleasure. And I want to quote a very important article, a book that he wrote, The New Manager, the Kibbutz Changed Its Way. And to see what Dr. Topel Manolo wrote in his book is similar to what I try to express now and what is the result of that process. Topel defined managerial languages, triumph, in becoming the organizing language of the kibbutz agenda, this is what I wrote, as a management by expert who glorified two mantras, economic effectiveness and maximizing profits. A trend developed encouraged expert managers to eradicate the need of the simple kibbutz member to be involved in the management. If you want to understand, maybe the main principle, the main rule, the main value, the core of the kibbutz arrangement is direct democracy. It's self-management. It's the idea that every member of the kibbutz can shape the way of life of the kibbutz through his responsibility and the formal ability to vote and to shape the kibbutz life. What Dr. Topel described in the book is the transformation to management by expert. Let's give the manager to decide, and we are simple members of the kibbutz, forget that our main principle was direct democracy, self-management. And this was a result of the process that I show now. I move to the last language and try to sum up some conclusion. The rise of the legal language, and it's becoming the primary language governing the kibbutz agenda, seeps in through several channels. The channel of criminal cases of kibbutz members, claims of members against the kibbutz movement standing against the state agency, objector to the change versus supporters of the change in specific kibbutz and more. I want to give two examples how the legal language or the process of legalization became more and more dominant in the kibbutz yard, in the kibbutz discourse. Here I show you the front page of the weekly of the kibbutz. It's called HaKibbutz, the kibbutz. And you can see the picture, but you need to understand the letters because nobody in here, all the millions that sits in this understand Hebrew. I will help you to translate what is written here, okay? So, first of all, the red letter said, on behalf of my client, okay? In the green one, we see 2000 phenomenon of the year. And in the white letter, we see, if we translate it, the entry of lawyers into the kibbutz yard changed the relationship between the members. We shall meet in court. And in the next page, you can see the title, the headline, Adoni HaShofet, it's Your Honor, and it's written, the year 2000 was typified by the court's intensive intervention in the kibbutz life. That's what happened when a vacuum is created between the movement institution and the member. This is the year phenomenon. And another example for this process, now if you need to be the chairperson of the kibbutz or the secretary, what you need to be? A lawyer, a jurist. So if the movement, the kibbutzim movement, try to make a seminar, courses for the manager, the chair manager, I want to show you can be kibbutz secretary and jurist. And I open a new course, legal aspect of kibbutz management. Because what is more important is to know if you are the chairperson to deal with all the legal and to be a jurist or a lawyer. Okay, I want to explain what we saw now. It's 4 languages that change. And if we want a kind of a lithium paper, Yar Lakmus, yes? As you can answer the question, who to turn for advice and guidance if I have a problem, if I have a question. So when we were in the ideological language, if you have a problem, you go to the ideological rabbi or Rebbe. Rebbe, it's more, rabbi, it's rabbi. And I write it, you go, we have a problem, let's ask Meir Yari or Yitzhak Tabenkin, the leaders of the kibbutz movement, what to do. When the psychological language was dominant and we have a problem, let's go to the psychological asking. Especially, I don't know how you say it in English, it was the Manchei HaTahalichim, that was the coordinator of what? Yes? He was make the decision, let's do like this in the kibbutz and so on. If we were now in the director or the managerial language, in the first stage, we have a problem, let's go to the organization consulate. After that, when we have directors and person managers and chairperson, what the chairman will say. And the last language, we go to the legal Rebbe, rabbi, and anyone, if I need to ask something, what the lawyer said. And it's demonstrate the changing organized language in the kibbutz. At the end of my paper, I want to ask a question that is relevant to the kibbutz movement, to the community of the kibbutz, but irrelevant, I think, to any one of that belong to this conference of ICSA. How you say that one commune or community is a story of successful or story of failure, a narrative of failure. And I think we need to understand that, and to answer this question, if we put 2 different parameters that can answer this question. The first parameter in any organization, and especially in that lecture about the kibbutz, the kibbutzim and the kibbutz movement, is the ability of organization to provide security and well-being to the member of the organization. This is one parameter. And the second parameter, and it's different parameter, is the adherence to the core values, to the main values. And if I want to judge it, or to answer the question by these 2 parameters, if the index for success is survival and its ability to provide its member with security or well-being, then the kibbutz capacity to adapt to changes, make it a phenomenal success story. The kibbutz recently, before 2 years, celebrate 120 years. And we can look admirably at an organization that was able to realize an agricultural revolution in the beginning, followed by an industrial revolution, that was then followed by education revolution and structural revolution, a succession of revolutions that came up to the overcoming of acute economic difficulties and they start a new experience of economic and demographic growth. If I be to make it simple, if you want to see what is a success, if people want to come to your organization. And now, the situation in the kibbutz after a huge crisis, that the sons are born in the kibbutz and many people out of the kibbutz want to be in the kibbutz and ask to be in the kibbutz. From this point of view, after so many crises, the ability of the kibbutz to transform and to survive and to give security and well-being, it's a phenomenal success because people want to be now in the kibbutz. It wasn't like that before 20 years. Most of the people and the parents tell to the children, leave the kibbutz. And now the children that left the kibbutz want to return back to the kibbutz. But if the index for accessing failure or success is adherence to well-defined idea that identified the kibbutz from its start, then there is no doubt that the gap between the collective ideal of the founding generation and the kibbutz today is immense. Hardly any of the founding values of the collective kibbutz remain in vigor. According to the most recent survey, there are less than 20% of all kibbutzim which define the same collective, and who makes the expert in these changes is our chairman, Dr. Shlomo Getz. I take these numbers, and now it's even less. From year to year, it's less kibbutzim that called like the traditional collective kibbutzim, not renewed kibbutzim. And houses are registered in the members' names. Private property is not supervised or restricted. There are constantly increasing income difference between kibbutz members. Before 20 years, the manager of the factory and the kindergarten, they will get the same salary, the same budget. Now you can live in kibbutz that one people will earn 4,000 shekel and other one 40,000 shekel. All of this typifies the renewing kibbutz and have little affinity with the core values and norms that define the collective kibbutz as Gemeinschaft Kommune. And I want to end it. Some will applaud, others weep, but those who mourn, those who mourn and those who bless the process of far-reaching changes cannot deny that it is a success story in terms of survival and a story of failure in terms of adherence to the original ambitions and value. תודה רבה.
Thank you very much. Well, the session was very efficient. We finished it in 15 minutes in advance. So we have time for questions. And, oh, there is a question. Manolo, please.
1 minute, we need to give him, I will give him.
The mic.
It's not a question, but a comment. Hello? I say that it's not a question, but a comment. I wrote a lot of years ago that I refer to the last thing that you present, that Yonina Talmon has this sociologist of the kibbutz was not correct. She say kibbutz is, and he described the first kibbutz and say all the time the kibbutz was slowly along away from the kibbutz. is less kibbutz. It's exactly as if you say that the baby that we come to the world, this is the man. And from these days, the first days of the children, with the time, every process, he is less, seems less as the first baby. I don't know what the kibbutz will be, but in another 10 years, when the people speak about the kibbutz, they refer to something that is not the first kibbutz. They're not the actual kibbutz. So that the question if the kibbutz is kibbutz or is not kibbutz is a non-relevant question at all. Kibbutz is all the time. Yes, but it's a conceptually, it's a undefined, it's a process, it's not a model. And it's important to see this as a process and not as a model.
Thank you, Manolo. Another question?
I want to.
Alon?
Okay. Thank you, Sylvia. Thank you, Yuval and Alon. One comment as after what Manolo said. I can't agree with the ideological failure. I think that I think that there is a question. There is a question if the kibbutz is what the members of the kibbutz want it to be, and if the kibbutz will be what the member really want it to be, and there won't be gap there, so it's not an ideological failure. That's why I think that the correct question is not that a lot of people want to come back to the kibbutz, to get back to the kibbutz, but the real question is why they want to return to the kibbutz, because they want as well, people want to go to the moshavim, but the moshav ovdim has no special identity anymore. But the kibbutz try to make even the renewal kibbutzim as a kind of special identity. And the question is whether the members identify with this special identity or not. And I think, I agree with you with the first parameter. I think that you have to change somewhat the second parameter. And this is a comment, you can agree or not, regarding question. I will call it the judicial step. The problem with it is the mutual trust, because when you need the lawyer, you don't have a trust, and it's a real problem in the two kinds of kibbutzim, I think. And I'll ask you a question like the good question you asked us yesterday regarding Sirkin. Okay, can you imagine what will be the language of the next step?
I can imagine.
You can imagine?
I have the answer.
I feel not so comfortable because maybe the question is too hard to answer.
No, my answer is that, and I would like that Alon will check it. But I'm the chair now and I want to speak. Alon? I think that not the next, but the parallel language now will be the community language. And I think that you have to try to look at that as in if it emerged and how. It's not instead, it's parallel.
Well, it's a community language. I don't know what I think that's the main focus now of, especially of new members, that they want a community. I don't know what they mean by community, but that Alon will have to see what are they speaking about, what the language, to understand what kind of community they think about.
I do agree.
Do you want to ask?
About the change of language, you explained very good the changes, but if we see why the reasons, the sociological reasons for this change, as the last, I don't refer now to the first changes, but the last, the lawyers, part of this situation is that the weakness of the kibbutz impulse, provoke that the government, the people of the government, all the system try to attack the kibbutz. But the kibbutz need the lawyers to defend. This is part of the.
Okay, any more comments? Yes, I want to ask Yuval and even Michal, Professor Michal Palgi, that we are glad that you with us and you wrote the article with Sylvie and Sylvia, the three of you, just if you want. And I will answer about the question here, but okay, if she wants. But I want to ask the same questions that I will ask, that you ask me about the next stage. I first begin with Professor Yuval Dror. Yuval, do you think that if we met 10 years from now, 20 years, Manolo will be with us, I'm sure, and we see how the influence of the kibbutzim point of view to Judaism will be grower, will be more influence, or do you think it will be less influence? How can you analyze the trends? It's for more influence or less influence on the Israeli society, not inside the kibbutz, but like you said before, the midrasha, bina, and so on. So what do you, I know that you are a historian and not dealing with the future, but as an expert that investigate this secular Judaism, what do you think? And the same to Professor Bijaoui and Professor Palgi for Sylvie and Michal. If you look all the process that Sylvia described for us, I think that I will give a one. Do you have time or?
Yes, we have 10 minutes.
Yeah, okay.
Don't take all of them.
I want to tell you a fantastic story of my sister, not sister, my brother's sister. She was in the most happy days when she bought a laundry that she can clean her clothes in her house. And I say, well, you're stupid, now we'll be a slave. You need always to iron and to put in the laundry. It was so wonderful that you have a communal laundry. And I see how it's satisfied. Now she can cook and now she can. So what do you think about the process of the status of the woman in shaping the kibbutz and their status?
Yes. Yuval?
Yes, first of all, I do agree with Shlomo that the community language is the relevant one now. Second, to Alon's question, I think that the kibbutz will be more influential because we have many identities of Judaism nowadays in Israel. Not only the Orthodox, the secular, and the ultra-Orthodox. We have those that are traditional, there are the liberal trends, and so on and so forth. And I think that the majority of the non-religious population in Israel is with this way of having the kind of kibbutz Judaism. Of course, there will be some problems because what we call in Hebrew hadata, yes, and the political quarrels between the separate sectors in the Israeli society. But I think that the kibbutz was an example. Look at the celebrations, for example, or all the, let's say, all the secular habits, or let's say the majority of them, were influenced from the kibbutz movement and are influenced from the kibbutz movement. So we have a chance to have our place in between the trends of Judaism. I can say it also in my private kibbutz, yes, Kfar Upin and the Bet Shean valley around us. Yes, we have influence. We are influential, and we have to translate it into actual activities and cooperations with the Zionist religious kibbutzim and so on and so forth.
Thank you, Yuval. Michal, what do you think
about women in the kibbutz? What's going to happen to them? Yes. What I wanted to say are two things. I'll say it in short. The first thing, I believe, I don't know, that more men are taking part in housework, are more taking part in cooking and so on. And the second thing that I want to say is that I've been doing some studies during the last year, and I saw that there was not much change in top positions of women in the kibbutz. Men are still holding quite strongly the economic positions, the main economic positions in the kibbutz, and women are more concentrated. I mean, they're more leading the cultural activities, the educational activities, and so on. This can change, but at the moment, it has not changed since our study in 2008 until now. So maybe it will change, but it did not change until now. And I do hope that some changes in this issue will be because of the changes in the definition of the roles and in the type of roles. On the other hand, what we do see from all this is that many top positions in the kibbutz are held by kibbutz people. There is a change, not by outsiders, not by advisors, not all this, but by kibbutz people who are taking those roles of managing the kibbutz. And I think this is a good sign for the future of the kibbutz, and it's a new ways. And in general, I think the kibbutz has been able to change and to adjust to changing times because it is an open system. It's not a closed system, it's an open system that people can learn from it, can see it, and so on. So this is my very short remarks that I wanted to say at the moment.
Thank you, Michal. Anton, last question.
Yeah, it's a comment to add to Alon. Thanks for your presentation. You mentioned at the end there about success and failure and how you gauge success and failure of the kibbutz. And you specifically talk about also the ideological element, and you classify that as failure. I think there's an important element that I'd like to add, that the kibbutz idea and the kibbutz practice and the kibbutz 100-year history and experience of what is possible, that idea is in the world. And that idea, people are taking that idea, that ideology and that way of living and continuing it. And I think that's a success. That it's not just confined to those kibbutz communities that maybe have chosen a different path. There are other people that are taking that idea and saying it is possible to live differently. It's possible to build and create and take responsibility and solidarity and all of those things. There's an example there. And so I think it's important to point out that ideologically there's something that's in the world that is important.
Thank you, Anton.
Yes, I will, but maybe Professor Sylvie, do you want to say something? We don't know if you hear us. Okay.
Okay, so we'll end no? Oh, you want to
answer?
Okay, of course.
We have shortly.
You have 2 minutes.
1 minute. Sylvie, you want to speak?
Regarding gender, I just want to point to the fact that a new group is emerging little by little, and it is the LGBT community as part of the democratic approach. That's all.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, because we need to finish, I do it shortly. And first of all, Anton that's sitting with us, I don't know if the 1,000 people that watch our conversation know, he lives in a special kibbutz, that you are absolutely right, that there are people in Israel and also in people in the world, that the main core of the kibbutz values are still relevant for them, and they try to create a communal life. And if we accept the concept of the end of the ideology, it's not true, not in Israel, not in the kibbutzim, not in the special or the youth movement and so on. And like you said, not in the world. And this will be the answer to the question. I think that I will use, I belong to a Shomer HaTzair movement, and we adopted the dialectic history, teza, antithesa, and synthesa. And what happened in the world and also in Israel and also in the kibbutzim, and I think it's relevant also to what happened here in ICSA. If the first stage was socialism and communism and so on, it was like a pendulum. How do you say it to tell it? I forgot, pendulum, yes? From the extreme socialism to privatization and to capitalism. How do you say capitalism, chaziri in English, the same word? Rampant capitalism, thank you, Anton. It was extreme pendulum to the other side. And we see now, we look for the balance. The word look for community. In the kibbutz, they are dealing and searching not just to build my villa in the kibbutz, it was, and it's already, but also to find the togetherness. I don't know if to be together, to live, like Yuval said, to create a beautiful culture of community, of Jewish religion, and not religion, secular, but belong to the tradition. And if you ask me what is the next language, I think now we are in the beginning of the creation of the synthesa. Not just me and not us, collective, but any such a balance between me and the others. Yes, also, the need of belonging is getting more and more a necessity.
Marisa Gonzalez, don't remember exactly, that she wrote a book that is El Hilo Rojo in Spanish, the Juta Shani, the Juta Shani. She say this, this line, she say, in the book, he explained how all over the history, there are people that look for Keilatut, for sense of community, sense of belonging, or no easy, they not belonging to togetherness.
Alon?
Yes.
Alon?
Okay, I think that.
Just to mention,
Okay. Yes.
Can I add?
Yes, can you, Yuval? You can
I
speak.
want to mention one leader in this community direction, Amita Etzioni and the communitarism, and it has a very big influence on education and some other places. So Amita Etzioni was one of the founders of Kibbutz Misgav Am and one of the researchers of the Kibbutz, the first, those from the Yonina Telmon Gabriel group. His term, communitarism, is very influential in the world, and we have to take it into consideration in such a debate that we had now.
Thank you. Okay, we came to the very end of this very interesting session. I want to thank all of you and see you in the next session.